The dust hadn't even settled from Sophia Kennedy's wagon when the first man started laughing, and within moments half the town of Black Hawk, Colorado seemed to be joining in at the sight of a young woman unloading carpentry tools in front of an empty storefront on Main Street. It was the spring of 1882, and women simply did not become carpenters, especially not in a rough mining town perched high in the Rocky Mountains where men outnumbered women 10 to 1, and opinions were as hard as the granite beneath their boots. Sophia kept her head high despite the heat rising in her cheeks, her honey-colored hair already escaping from the sensible bun she had pinned that morning. At 22 years old, she had traveled alone from Philadelphia after her father's death, carrying nothing but his tools, his instruction books, and a stubborn determination that had been both praised and cursed throughout her life. Her father, a master carpenter, had taught her everything he knew during the long winters when his lungs grew too weak for the work. She had promised him on his deathbed that she would use those skills, that she would make something of herself. She had not promised it would be easy. "Look at that, boys," called out a grizzled miner from outside the saloon, his words slightly slurred despite the early hour. "Little lady thinks she is going to build something with those tools, probably cannot even lift that saw." Sophia turned to face him, her green eyes flashing. "This saw built half the fine houses in Philadelphia. It will do just fine here, thank you." The men laughed harder, and Sophia felt her resolve waver for just a moment. She had expected resistance, but the reality of it stung more than she had anticipated. She bent to lift her toolbox, determined not to show weakness, when a shadow fell across the dusty street. "Seems to me a person willing to work with their hands deserves respect, not mockery," came a deep voice, measured and calm, but carrying an authority that made the laughter die in throats like snuffed candles. Sophia looked up to see a man standing between her and the crowd, tall and broad-shouldered with sun-weathered skin and dark hair that touched his collar. He wore the practical clothing of a working rancher, his boots scuffed, and his shirt sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with muscle. But it was his face that caught her attention, strong-featured with intelligent gray eyes that held none of the derision she had seen in the others. He looked to be perhaps 26 or 27, old enough to command respect, but young enough to still believe in fairness. "Nobody asked you, Fletcher," one of the men muttered, but there was significantly less enthusiasm in his voice now. "I am asking myself," the man replied, and then he turned to Sophia and touched the brim of his hat. "Fletcher Ward, madam. I run a ranch about 5 miles north of town." "Welcome to Black Hawk." "Sophia Kennedy," she replied, straightening her spine and meeting his gaze directly. "Thank you for the welcome. It is more than I have received from most." Fletcher glanced at her wagon, taking in the quality tools arranged carefully in their boxes, the lumber she had brought with her, the neat bundles of nails and the level that had belonged to her father. "You are a carpenter," he said, and it was not a question or a joke, simply a statement of fact. "I am," Sophia confirmed, daring him to challenge her. Instead, Fletcher nodded slowly. "Good. This town could use one. The fellow we had left last winter and half the buildings are in need of repair. I have a barn that needs new doors before next winter, and the ranch house could use a proper porch." He paused, then added, "If you are looking for work, that is." Sophia felt something tight in her chest begin to loosen. "I am," she said. "But I should tell you I have never built a barn door before. Only smaller things, furniture mostly, and some interior work on houses." "But you can learn," Fletcher said, and again it was not a question. "I can learn," Sophia agreed and found herself smiling despite everything. "My father always said the principles are the same whether you are building a jewelry box or a house. You just need to understand the wood and respect the grain." Fletcher's expression softened slightly, something that might have been approval or possibly the beginning of a smile. "Your father sounds like he was a wise man." "He was," Sophia said quietly. "He died 3 months ago. That is why I came west. There was nothing left for me in Philadelphia, and he always talked about the opportunities out here." "I am sorry for your loss," Fletcher said, and the sincerity in his voice made Sophia's eyes prick with unexpected tears. She blinked them back firmly. "But he was right about the opportunities. If you are willing to work hard and learn, there is room out here for anyone with skill and determination." The crowd had dispersed somewhat during their conversation, the men losing interest now that there was no more entertainment to be had. A few still watched from the shadows of the saloon, but their hostility had faded to mere curiosity. "I appreciate the offer of work," Sophia said, "but I should establish myself here in town first. I have rented this space, and I need to set up my workshop. Once I am settled, perhaps in a week or two, I could ride out to your ranch and discuss the barn doors." Fletcher shook his head slowly. "Forgive me for being blunt, Miss Kennedy, but you are not going to get much work in town. Not at first. These men," he gestured vaguely toward the saloon and the other buildings lining Main Street, "they will make things difficult for you. They will claim your work is not good enough, or they will refuse to hire you on principle, or they will hire you and then refuse to pay fair wages. I have seen it before with anyone who does not fit their narrow idea of how things should be." "So you are suggesting I give up before I even start?" Sophia asked, feeling her defenses rising. "No," Fletcher said firmly. "I am suggesting you be smart about it. Come work on my ranch. I will pay you fair wages, provide room and board, and give you the time and space to prove what you can do. Once you have built those barn doors and the porch, once you have something to show for your skills, then the men in town will have a harder time dismissing you. Success is harder to argue with than potential." Sophia studied him carefully, looking for any sign of ulterior motives. She had been warned before leaving Philadelphia that Western men might see a woman alone as easy prey, but Fletcher's gray eyes held nothing but honest practicality. Still, accepting his offer meant going to his ranch, being dependent on him for work and lodging, trusting a man she had just met. "I appreciate your confidence in me," she said slowly, "but you have not seen my work. How do you know I am capable of building what you need?" Fletcher gestured toward her tools. "Those are quality tools, well-maintained and obviously used by someone who knows their value. Your wagon is packed efficiently, every item secured and placed for balance. And the way you spoke about your father's teaching, about understanding the wood and respecting the grain, that tells me you learned from someone who knew their craft." He paused. "But more than that, you came all this way alone, and you stood up to those men despite being outnumbered and mocked. That kind of courage and determination is worth more than experience." Despite her reservations, Sophia felt herself warming to this rancher who spoke of courage and determination like they were skills as valuable as carpentry. "You make a compelling argument, Mr. Ward." "Fletcher," he corrected gently. "And I am not trying to pressure you, Miss Kennedy. If you would prefer to try your luck in town first, I understand. But the offer stands, and it will still be there if you change your mind." Sophia looked around at the town of Black Hawk, at the rough buildings and rougher men, at the mountains looming above them with their peaks still white with snow despite the spring warmth in the valley. She thought about setting up her workshop alone, about facing the daily mockery and resistance, about potentially spending her savings while waiting for work that might never come. "Call me Sophia," she heard herself say. "And I accept your offer, Fletcher, but I have conditions." "Name them," Fletcher said. I want a contract in writing specifying my wages and the terms of my employment. I want my own sleeping quarters with a lock on the door, and I want it understood that I am there to work, nothing more." "Agreed," Fletcher said without hesitation. 50 cents a day plus room and board, which is standard wages for skilled labor. You can have the small cabin behind the main house. It has a good lock and a stove. And you will be treated with respect by everyone on my ranch. That much I guarantee." 50 cents a day was fair, more than fair really for someone unproven. Sophia felt the last of her reservations begin to crumble. "Then we have an agreement," she said, extending her hand. Fletcher shook it, his grip firm but not crushing, his palm calloused from hard work. "Welcome to the Ward Ranch," he said. "When would you like to start? How about now?" Sophia replied. "I can follow your wagon with mine if you help me load the heavy pieces." Fletcher smiled then, a real smile that transformed his serious face and made him look younger and considerably more handsome. "Now sounds perfect," he said. It took them an hour to properly load both wagons, with Fletcher proving to be both strong and careful with her tools. He asked intelligent questions about their uses, listened when she explained the difference between a rip saw and a crosscut saw, and showed genuine interest in the specialized planes her father had collected over his lifetime. By the time they were ready to leave, Sophia found herself chattering about mortise and tenon joints, about the properties of different woods, about the satisfaction of planing a board so smooth it felt like silk under your fingers. "I apologize," she said finally, cutting herself off mid-sentence. "I am talking too much. My father used to say I could discuss carpentry for hours if given the chance." "Do not apologize," Fletcher said as he checked the straps securing her lumber. "It is good to hear someone speak with passion about their work. Too many people just go through the motions." They rode out of Black Hawk in the early afternoon, Fletcher leading the way on his wagon pulled by two sturdy draft horses, Sophia following in her smaller rig. The road climbed steadily, winding through stands of pine and aspen, crossing clear streams that ran cold with snowmelt. The air grew thinner and cleaner, and despite everything, Sophia felt her spirits lifting. The Ward Ranch appeared gradually as they crested a rise, spreading out before them in a high valley ringed by peaks. The main house was large and well built, constructed of logs with a stone chimney and real glass windows that caught the afternoon sun. Around it clustered various outbuildings, a large barn that had clearly seen better days, a stable, a chicken coop, a smokehouse, and the small cabin Fletcher had mentioned. Beyond these buildings, pastures stretched toward the tree line, dotted with cattle that looked healthy and content. "It is beautiful," Sophia said truthfully as Fletcher pulled his wagon to a stop near the barn. "It is home," Fletcher said, and there was pride in his voice. "My father homesteaded this land in 1865, right after the war. He built the house himself, cleared the pastures, established the herd. When he died 5 years ago, I inherited everything." He climbed down from the wagon and came to help Sophia down from hers. "It has been a lot of work keeping it running alone, but I manage." "You run this entire ranch by yourself?" Sophia asked, looking around at the scope of the operation. "I have 2 hands who come during the summer months when the work is heaviest," Fletcher explained. "But otherwise, yes, it is just me. I have considered hiring more help, but good ranch hands are hard to find, and I prefer quality over quantity." He led her toward the small cabin. "Which is why I am glad to have you here. The barn has been deteriorating for 2 years now, and I have been putting off the repairs because I do not have the skill to do them properly." The cabin was small but clean, with a rope bed in one corner, a small table and 2 chairs, a wood stove, and even a washstand with a pitcher and basin. The windows had real glass and curtains, and there was a thick rug on the floor that looked hand-braided. Most importantly, the door had a substantial lock with a key waiting in it. "This is more than adequate," Sophia said. "Thank you." "There is a well between here and the main house," Fletcher said. "Help yourself to water any time. I usually eat breakfast at dawn and dinner at dusk. You are welcome to join me in the main house, or I can bring food out to you if you prefer." "I will eat with you," Sophia decided. "If I am going to be working here, we should get to know each other, and I promise I am a better carpenter than I am a cook." Fletcher laughed, a warm sound that seemed rusty from disuse. "That makes two of us. I am afraid my cooking is purely functional, but it keeps me alive." They spent the rest of the afternoon unloading Sophia's tools and supplies, arranging them in the barn where she would be working. Fletcher showed her the current doors, which were indeed in terrible shape. The wood rotted through in places, and the hinges rusted beyond saving. "The opening is 8 feet wide and 10 feet tall," Fletcher said, measuring with a length of rope. "I need doors that will last another 20 years, that will stand up to the wind and snow we get up here. Can you do it?" Sophia studied the opening, calculating in her head. "I can do it, but I will need more lumber than I brought. Doors that size, built to last, will require substantial framing and proper bracing." "Where is the nearest sawmill?" "Back in Black Hawk," Fletcher said. "But they will overcharge you and they might not even sell to you. Better to let me handle it. I have an account there. You make a list of what you need, and I will pick it up next time I go to town." "I should pay for my own materials," Sophia protested. "You can pay me back out of your wages if you insist," Fletcher said. "But honestly, this is material for my barn. I should be buying it anyway." They were still discussing the details when Sophia realized the sun was getting low and her stomach was growling. Fletcher noticed at the same moment and straightened up, brushing sawdust from his pants. "I should start on dinner," he said. "Give me half an hour, then come up to the house. I hope you like beef stew because that is about the extent of my culinary range. After a day like today, I would eat boot leather and be grateful," Sophia said, then immediately wondered if that was too informal. But Fletcher just grinned and headed toward the main house. Sophia took the opportunity to settle into her cabin, unpacking her few personal belongings and making up the bed with the linens she had brought from Philadelphia. The mattress was filled with fresh straw and surprisingly comfortable. The stove drew well when she tested it, and there was even a stack of split wood beside it. Fletcher had clearly prepared the cabin with care, and that thoughtfulness touched her more than she wanted to admit. The main house was warm and welcoming when she knocked on the door exactly 30 minutes later. Fletcher had lit lamps against the gathering darkness, and the smell of stew was indeed wafting from the kitchen. The interior was simply furnished but comfortable, with sturdy furniture that looked handmade and several books on shelves near the fireplace. "You made your own furniture," Sophia observed, running her hand along the back of a chair that showed skilled if somewhat rough craftsmanship. "My father and I together," Fletcher said, stirring the pot on the stove. "He believed a man should be able to provide for himself in all ways. I am not an expert like your father was, but I can do basic work." "This is good work," Sophia said honestly. "The joints are solid and the proportions are right. With some finer finishing, these would be quality pieces." Fletcher looked pleased as he ladled stew into 2 bowls. "Maybe you can teach me some tricks while you are here. The barn doors are not going to take all summer, and I hate to see a skilled teacher go to waste." They ate at the kitchen table, and Sophia was surprised to find the stew was actually quite good, hearty and well seasoned. Fletcher proved to be easy to talk to, asking questions about her life in Philadelphia, her training under her father, her decision to come west. In turn, he told her about growing up on the ranch, learning the cattle business, weathering the harsh winters and the occasional bear or mountain lion that threatened the herd. "It must be lonely," Sophia ventured, "being up here by yourself most of the year." Fletcher was quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "Sometimes," he admitted, "but I prefer honest loneliness to dishonest company. I tried living in town for a while after my father died, thought maybe I should be more social. But the people there," he shook his head, "they are more interested in gossip and appearances than in anything real. Up here, life is honest. The work is real, the challenges are real, and when you accomplish something, you know it is because of your own effort, not because you played some social game." "I think I understand that," Sophia said slowly. "In Philadelphia, after my father got sick, people were very concerned about appearances. They pitied me for having to work, for learning a trade instead of finding a husband. They thought I was throwing my life away. But I was never happier than when I was in the workshop with my father, creating something beautiful and useful with my own hands." "Then they were fools," Fletcher said bluntly. "The world needs more people who can create and fewer people who just talk about it." They talked until the moon rose over the mountains, and Sophia was startled to realize how comfortable she felt in this rancher's kitchen, how natural the conversation flowed. When she finally excused herself to return to her cabin, Fletcher walked her across the yard despite her protests. "There are mountain lions in these peaks," he said simply, "and bears coming out of hibernation. I will walk you over and back every evening until you feel comfortable with the routine." "Thank you," Sophia said, "for everything today. For standing up for me in town, for offering me this work, for treating me like I am capable." "You are capable," Fletcher said. "Anyone with eyes can see that. The question is whether you will let other people's doubts stop you or whether you will prove them wrong. My money is on the latter." Sophia went to sleep that night with his words warming her more effectively than the fire in her stove. And for the first time since her father's death, she felt something that might have been hope. The next 3 weeks fell into a rhythm that Sophia had not realized she needed. She woke at dawn to find breakfast waiting in the main house, ate with Fletcher while they discussed the day's work, then spent the morning hours in the barn working on the doors. Fletcher would come by periodically to check on her progress, to bring water or coffee, to ask questions about what she was doing. He proved to be a quick learner, understanding the logic behind mortise and tenon joints, practicing with scrap wood until he could cut a reasonable approximation. "You have a natural feel for it," Sophia told him one morning as she watched him plane a board smooth. "Your hands understand the work even if your mind has not caught up yet." "Good teacher," Fletcher said, examining the board critically. "Though I think I have a long way to go before I am building anything people will pay for." "You have to start somewhere," Sophia reminded him. "My first jewelry box looked like it had been assembled by a drunk beaver. My father kept it anyway, said it reminded him that everyone begins as a beginner." They talked while they worked, long, rambling conversations about everything and nothing. Fletcher told her about the challenges of ranching at this altitude, about the brief growing season and the long winters, about the satisfaction of watching calves grow strong and healthy. Sophia shared memories of her father, stories from Philadelphia, her observations about the mountains and the wildlife she was learning to recognize. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, something shifted between them. Sophia found herself taking extra care with her appearance in the mornings, pinning her hair more carefully, and choosing her newer work dress. Fletcher started showing up at the barn with small gifts, a handful of wildflowers, a particularly smooth stone he had found, a book he thought she might enjoy. Neither of them spoke about what was happening, but the awareness hung between them like the sawdust that caught the sunlight in the barn. The barn doors took shape under Sophia's hands, massive and solid, built to last generations. She used the techniques her father had taught her, but adapted them for the larger scale, learning as she went, occasionally making mistakes but always finding ways to correct them. Fletcher helped when she needed a second pair of hands, learning to anticipate what she would need next, working in comfortable silence or easy conversation as the mood struck them. It was during the 4th week, as they were fitting the first door onto its new hinges, that Fletcher suddenly said, "I want you to know, Sophia, I have not had this much peace in years." Sophia looked up from the hinge she was adjusting, surprised by the sudden seriousness in his voice. "Peace." "Having you here," Fletcher said, not quite meeting her eyes. "Having someone to talk to work with, to share meals with. It has made me realize how much I had let myself become isolated. I told myself I preferred the loneliness, but I think I was just protecting myself from disappointment." "I know the feeling," Sophia said softly. "After my father died, I convinced myself I was better off alone, that depending on people only led to pain. But you came here anyway," Fletcher pointed out. "You accepted help from a stranger. That took courage." "Or desperation," Sophia said with a slight smile. "I am not sure I had much choice." "You had a choice," Fletcher said firmly. "You could have stayed in Philadelphia. You could have given up on carpentry and found some other way to survive. But you chose to keep fighting, to keep pursuing what you love." He finally met her eyes. "That is not desperation, Sophia. That is strength." Sophia felt her breath catch in her throat at the intensity in his gray eyes, at the sincerity in his voice. "Fletcher," she began, but was not sure how to continue. He looked away first, clearing his throat. "Sorry, I did not mean to make you uncomfortable. We should focus on getting this hinge set before we lose the light." They worked in silence for a while, but it was not an uncomfortable silence. If anything, Sophia felt like something important had been acknowledged, even if not fully spoken. When the first door was finally hung and swinging smoothly on its new hinges, they stood back to admire their work. "It is beautiful," Fletcher said. "Better than I imagined." "You are a true craftsman, Sophia." "Craftswoman," Sophia corrected with a smile. "And thank you. But I could not have done it without your help. Handling wood this size requires more than one pair of hands." "Then we make a good team," Fletcher said, and the way he said it made it clear he was not just talking about carpentry. That evening, after dinner, Fletcher asked if Sophia would like to walk up to the ridge above the ranch. "The view at sunset is something special," he said. "And I thought you might like to see the full extent of the property." Sophia agreed, her heart beating a little faster than the climb warranted. They walked in comfortable silence through the high meadows, where wildflowers were beginning to bloom in the warming soil. The cattle watched them pass with placid curiosity, and once they startled a small herd of elk that bounded away toward the tree line. At the ridge, they stopped to catch their breath and take in the view. The ranch spread out below them, looking like a toy homestead in the vast landscape. To the west, the sun was sinking toward the peaks, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose and purple. To the east, the first stars were beginning to appear in the deepening blue. "I can see why you love it here," Sophia said. "It is like standing at the top of the world." "My father proposed to my mother on this ridge," Fletcher said quietly. He used to tell the story of how nervous he was, how he had practiced his speech for weeks but forgot every word when he actually got her up here. "What did he say instead?" Sophia asked. "He just pointed at the view and said, 'I want to share this with you every day for the rest of my life.' And my mother laughed and said yes before he could say anything else." Fletcher smiled at the memory. He always said the best words come from the heart, not from preparation. Sophia's mouth was suddenly dry. That sounds like wise advice. Fletcher turned to face her fully, and in the dying light his expression was open and vulnerable in a way she had never seen before. Sophia, I know we have only known each other for a few weeks. I know you came here for work, not for any kind of personal entanglement, but I have to be honest with you. These weeks have been the best of my life. Not just because you are skilled and hardworking, though you are both those things, but because when I talk to you, I feel like I am talking to someone who understands me. When I am with you, I feel like I am my best self. Sophia's heart was racing now, her palms damp despite the cool evening air. Fletcher, you do not have to say anything, Fletcher interrupted quickly. I just needed you to know. I am not asking you to feel the same way or to change anything about our arrangement. I just could not keep pretending I see you only as an employee or a friend. You have become more important to me than that. You did not let me finish, Sophia said, and was surprised to find she was smiling. I was going to say I feel the same way. I have been trying not to because I was afraid of complicating things, of jeopardizing the first good thing that has happened to me since my father died. But the truth is, Fletcher Ward, I think I have been falling in love with you since the moment you stood up for me in Black Hawk. Fletcher's face transformed with wonder and joy. You mean that? He asked, stepping closer. I mean it, Sophia confirmed, and then he was kissing her, gentle and questioning at first, then deeper as she responded. His arms came around her, strong and warm, and she leaned into him, feeling safe and desired and understood all at once. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathing hard and grinning like fools. I have wanted to do that for weeks, Fletcher admitted. You could have, Sophia said. I would not have objected. I did not want to presume, Fletcher said. I wanted to make sure you knew I respected you, that I was not just some rancher trying to take advantage of a woman in a difficult position. I know that, Sophia said, touching his face gently. You have shown me nothing but respect from the beginning. That is one of the reasons I fell for you. They walked back to the ranch hand in hand as the stars came out in full glory above them, making plans and promises, talking about the future in a way that assumed they would be facing it together. It was understood, though not yet formally stated, that Sophia would not be returning to town, that her place was here now with Fletcher. But of course, life was rarely simple. The next morning, Fletcher had to ride into Black Hawk for supplies, and he asked Sophia if she wanted to come along. We need lumber for the second door, he pointed out. And you should probably let people know you are still alive. I imagine the town gossips have had a field day with your disappearance. Sophia agreed, though she felt a knot of anxiety at the thought of facing the town again. She wore her best dress, determined to look professional and confident, and sat beside Fletcher on the wagon seat as they made the journey down the mountain. Black Hawk looked the same as when she had left it nearly a month ago, though perhaps a bit busier now that the summer mining season was getting underway. Heads turned as they drove down Main Street, and Sophia could see the speculation in people's eyes. Fletcher helped her down from the wagon in front of the general store, his hand lingering on hers just a moment longer than necessary. Inside the store, the owner, a portly man named Bernard Sawyer, looked up from his ledger with obvious surprise. Miss Kennedy, he said. We thought you had moved on. Just working out of town, Sophia said pleasantly. I am building barn doors for Mr. Ward here. Barn doors, Bernard repeated, his tone suggesting this was about as likely as teaching a dog to read. How are those coming along? Nearly finished with the first one, Fletcher interjected before Sophia could respond. Best piece of craftsmanship I have ever seen. Miss Kennedy is a true artist with wood. Bernard looked skeptical but clearly did not want to directly contradict one of his better customers. "Well, that is fine then. What can I get for you today?" They spent 20 minutes going over Sophia's lumber list, with Bernard becoming increasingly impressed despite himself as Sophia explained exactly what she needed and why. She knew her materials, knew the qualities of different woods, knew how to calculate board feet in her head faster than Bernard could do it with pencil and paper. "Your father taught you well," Bernard finally admitted grudgingly. "I will have this order ready by end of day." As they left the store, they nearly collided with three women who were clearly on their way in. Sophia recognized them as the wives of prominent mine owners, dressed in their finest day clothes despite the dusty street. "Miss Kennedy," said the eldest of them, a sharp-featured woman named Margaret Porter. "How interesting to see you. We heard you had left town." "Just working on a project," Sophia said, keeping her voice even and polite. "Yes, we heard about that too," Margaret said, her eyes flicking to Fletcher and back to Sophia with obvious meaning. "How very modern of you living out at the Ward Ranch, without a chaperone." Sophia felt her cheeks heat but kept her composure. "I am living in my own cabin and working as a carpenter. There is nothing inappropriate about it." "Of course not," Margaret said in a tone that suggested exactly the opposite. "I am sure Mr. Ward is a perfect gentleman. Still, one does wonder what your father would think." "My father would be proud," Sophia said firmly, feeling her temper rise. "He taught me to be independent, to use my skills to make my own way in the world. He would be proud that I am doing exactly what he trained me to do." "Carpentry," one of the other women said, wrinkling her nose. "Such rough work for a young lady." "Rougher than spending an hour gossiping on a street corner," Sophia shot back, and immediately regretted her sharp tongue. But she was tired of being judged, tired of having to defend her choices to people who had never built anything more complex than a malicious rumor. Margaret's face flushed with anger. "Well, I never, ladies," Fletcher interrupted smoothly, stepping slightly forward so he was between them and Sophia. "I am sure you all have important matters to attend to, as do we. Good day." He took Sophia's elbow and guided her down the street before the women could respond, but Sophia could hear their outraged whispers following them. "I should not have said that," Sophia said as soon as they were out of earshot. "That was rude." "That was magnificent," Fletcher corrected, and when she looked up at him in surprise, he was grinning. "Margaret Porter has been the self-appointed moral guardian of this town for as long as I can remember, and no one has ever stood up to her. I wish I had a photograph of her face." Despite herself, Sophia laughed. "You are not worried about what she will say, about what people will think." "Not even a little bit," Fletcher said. "Let them talk. We know the truth, and that is all that matters." But as they waited for Bernard to finish their order, Sophia could not help but notice the looks they were getting, the whispers that followed them. She had known that living at the ranch would fuel gossip, but hearing Margaret Porter's insinuations had made it real in a way she had not quite prepared for. They loaded the lumber in the afternoon and started the journey back to the ranch, but Sophia was quiet, lost in her own thoughts. "What is wrong?" Fletcher finally asked. "Those women," Sophia said. "What they implied about us. It bothered me more than it should have." "Because it touched on something real," Fletcher guessed. "Because even though we are being proper about everything, the feelings are there." "Yes," Sophia admitted. "And because I do not want people to think poorly of you because of me. You have a reputation in this town, Fletcher. You are respected. I do not want to damage that." Fletcher pulled the wagon to a stop and turned to face her fully. "Sophia, do you know why I left town and moved permanently to the ranch 5 years ago? It was because I got tired of caring what people thought. My father had just died and everyone had opinions about what I should do. I should sell the ranch, I should get married, I should be more social, I should be less ambitious, I should be more traditional. Everyone had advice and none of it felt right. He took her hand. So I stopped listening. I moved to the ranch full-time and started living by my own rules. And yes, I was lonely sometimes, but I was free. I was myself. I am not going to give that up now, and I am certainly not going to let Margaret Porter and her friends dictate how I live my life or who I care about. But what if they make trouble? Sophia asked. What if they damage your business? Then I will manage, Fletcher said simply. Sophia, I need you to understand something. Meeting you, having you in my life, it is worth whatever social complications it causes. You are worth it. Sophia felt tears prick her eyes. No one has ever said anything like that to me before. Then they were all fools, Fletcher said. Every last one of them. They finished the journey in better spirits, and over the next 2 weeks, they completed the second barn door and began work on the porch Fletcher had mentioned. Sophia was in her element designing the porch, planning the support posts and railings, calculating the proper pitch for drainage. Fletcher helped with the heavy construction, and together they built something that was both functional and beautiful, a natural extension of the house that looked like it had always been there. Word of Sophia's work must have spread despite the gossips, because one afternoon a rancher from the neighboring property rode over to see the barn doors. His name was Thomas Hendricks, a weathered man in his 50s with a practical eye. Heard you had some fancy new doors, Thomas said after greeting Fletcher. Mind if I take a look? Fletcher led him to the barn, and Sophia watched nervously as Thomas examined her work, running his hands over the smooth wood, testing the hinges, pushing the doors open and closed. You build these? Thomas asked her directly. I did, Sophia confirmed. With Mr. Ward's assistance on the heavy lifting, Thomas nodded slowly. They are good. Better than good, actually. The balance is perfect, the finish is clean, and I can tell these will last. He turned to Fletcher. She does this kind of work for hire, she does, Fletcher said, and Sophia heard the pride in his voice. I need a new bunkhouse for my hands, Thomas said. Nothing fancy but solid. Could you handle that? Sophia's heart leaped. I have never built an entire structure before, she said honestly. But I understand the principles. If you are willing to take a chance on me, I am willing to take it on. Fair enough, Thomas said. I will pay standard rates, and if you do half as good a job as you did on these doors, I will be happy. They spent an hour discussing the specifications Thomas wanted, and by the time he left, Sophia had her first independent contract. She was so excited she could barely contain herself, and Fletcher spun her around in the barn, both of them laughing like children. You did it, he said. You are a real carpenter now, a professional. I have always been a professional, Sophia corrected, but she was grinning. Now I have a client who recognizes it. That evening after dinner, Fletcher became serious. Sophia, we need to talk about the future. Sophia felt her stomach clench. That sounds ominous. Not ominous, Fletcher assured her quickly. Just practical. You are going to have more work now. People will see the bunkhouse you build for Thomas, and if it is good, you will get more contracts. But you cannot keep living in my cabin and working out of my barn. People will talk, and eventually it will affect both our reputations. So you want me to leave? Sophia said quietly, feeling like the ground was dropping out from under her. No, Fletcher said firmly. I want you to marry me. Sophia's head snapped up. What? Fletcher took her hands. I love you, Sophia. I think I have loved you since I saw you standing in the street in Black Hawk, refusing to back down despite being outnumbered and mocked. These weeks with you have been the happiest of my life. I want every morning to start with your face across the breakfast table. I want every evening to end discussing the day's work together. I want to help you build your carpentry business, and I want you to help me with the ranch. I want to share everything with you." "Fletcher," Sophia breathed and found she was crying and smiling at the same time. "Yes, yes, of course I will marry you." He kissed her then, deep and passionate, and Sophia felt like every difficult thing that had brought her to this moment had been worth it. They held each other for a long time, making quiet promises, planning a future that seemed bright with possibility. They were married 3 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the ranch, with Thomas Hendricks and his wife standing as witnesses. Sophia wore her mother's dress, which she had brought from Philadelphia, and Fletcher wore his finest suit. They spoke their vows at sunset on the ridge where Fletcher had first confessed his feelings, with the mountains bearing witness and the sky painted in glorious colors. Not everyone approved, of course. Margaret Porter and her friends made their displeasure known throughout Black Hawk, suggesting that the marriage was improper or that Fletcher had been trapped. But the gossip had less power now, because Sophia's work spoke for itself. The bunkhouse she built for Thomas Hendricks was solid and well-crafted, and by the time it was finished, she had 3 more contracts lined up. Fletcher was her partner in every sense, helping with the heavy work when she needed it, managing the business side of things, defending her when necessary, though she rarely needed defending anymore. Her reputation grew throughout the region as the carpenter who could build anything, who delivered quality work on time and on budget. They settled into married life with surprising ease, learning each other's rhythms and habits, building something together that was stronger than either of them alone. Sophia set up a proper workshop in town, though she and Fletcher kept the cabin at the ranch for when she had projects nearby. They split their time between the ranch and town, with Sophia taking on increasingly complex projects and Fletcher expanding his cattle operation. Their first child, a son they named Robert after Sophia's father, was born in the spring of 1884. Sophia worked right up until the day she went into labor, putting the finishing touches on a house she was building. Fletcher was beside himself with worry, but Sophia remained calm, insisting that women had been having babies while working for centuries. Robert proved to be a healthy, happy baby with his mother's green eyes and his father's dark hair. Sophia strapped him to her back while she worked when he was small, and as he grew, he played in the sawdust at her feet, learning the names of tools before he could properly walk. "He is going to be a carpenter," Fletcher predicted, watching their son carefully stack blocks of wood. "Or a rancher," Sophia countered. "He loves helping you with the cattle, or both," Fletcher said, pulling her close. "He can be anything he wants. That is the life we are building for him, where he has choices." Their daughter Clara was born 2 years later, as fierce and determined as her mother. Sophia hired her first apprentice when Clara was a baby, a young man from town who wanted to learn the trade. Within 5 years, Sophia had 3 apprentices and more work than she could handle alone. She taught them everything her father had taught her, passing on the knowledge and the love of craftsmanship. The town of Black Hawk changed around them as the years passed. The mining boom eventually slowed, but the town remained, transforming into a more stable community. Sophia's carpentry business became a cornerstone of that community, training a new generation of builders and craftsmen. Fletcher's ranch prospered, becoming known for quality cattle and ethical treatment of both animals and workers. Margaret Porter eventually apologized to Sophia, though it took nearly a decade. She appeared at Sophia's workshop one afternoon, older and softer than she had been, and said simply, "I was wrong about you. You have built a good life through hard work and integrity. I am sorry for doubting you." Sophia, who had long since forgiven the gossip if not forgotten it, accepted the apology gracefully. Life was too short and too good to hold grudges. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Fletcher surprised Sophia by taking her back to the ridge where they had married. It was sunset again, and the view was just as breathtaking as it had been that first time. "You remember what my father said when he proposed to my mother here?" Fletcher asked. "He said he wanted to share this with her every day for the rest of his life," Sophia recalled. "I have shared it with you," Fletcher said, pulling her close. "Every day, in every way that matters. And I want you to know, Sophia, that these 10 years have been everything I hoped for and more. You have made me a better man. You have built an incredible business. You have raised 2 amazing children, and you have loved me even when I did not deserve it." "You have always deserved it," Sophia said. "From the moment you stood up for me when everyone else was laughing. You saw who I really was and you believed in me. That is the greatest gift anyone has ever given me." "We believed in each other," Fletcher corrected. "That is what made the difference." They stood there as the sun set and the stars emerged, holding each other and reflecting on the life they had built together. It had not always been easy. There had been financial struggles, social challenges, personal losses. But they had faced everything together, and that had made all the difference. By the time Robert was 15 and Clara was 13, Sophia's carpentry business had grown into the largest construction company in the region. She employed a dozen craftsmen and took on projects throughout Colorado. Robert worked alongside her during the summers, showing a real aptitude for the work, while Clara had developed a fascination with ranch management and spent her time learning everything she could from Fletcher. "They are getting everything backwards," Fletcher joked one evening. "The boy should be learning ranching and the girl should be learning carpentry." "Or they are getting it exactly right," Sophia countered. "They are following their interests instead of their gender." "Is that not what we always wanted for them?" Fletcher laughed and conceded the point. Their children were growing into capable, confident young people who knew their own minds, and both parents were immensely proud. On a crisp autumn day in 1895, Sophia stood back and surveyed the new town hall in Black Hawk, the largest and most complex structure she had ever designed. It was 3 stories tall with a clock tower, built to last for generations, a testament to her skill and her vision. The town council had commissioned it specifically from her, despite the fact that larger firms from Denver had bid on the project. Fletcher stood beside her, his arm around her waist, equally proud. "Your father would be amazed," he said. "My father would be insufferable," Sophia corrected with a smile. "He would want to discuss every detail, debate every joint, critique every finish." "And you would love every minute of it," Fletcher said, because he knew her well enough to know that was true. That evening, the town held a dedication ceremony for the new hall. And for the first time in her life, Sophia stood before the entire population of Black Hawk and received genuine applause and appreciation. The mayor gave a speech praising her contributions to the town, noting that she had constructed more than half the buildings currently standing and had trained most of the craftsmen working in the region. "When Sophia Kennedy first came to our town," the mayor said, "many of us laughed at the idea of a woman carpenter. We were fools. Sophia Kennedy Ward has proven herself to be not just a competent tradesperson, but one of the finest builders in Colorado. She has created structures that will serve our community for generations, and she has done it with integrity, skill, and grace. We are honored to have her among us." Sophia felt Fletcher squeeze her hand as she stood to accept the town's recognition, and she saw Robert and Clara beaming at her from the front row. It had been a long journey from that dusty afternoon when she first arrived in Black Hawk, but every step had been worth it. In the years that followed, Sophia gradually stepped back from the day-to-day operations of her business turning more responsibility over to Robert and her trusted foremen. She still took on special projects that interested her, still taught apprentices who showed particular promise. But she also spent more time at the ranch with Fletcher, enjoying the life they had built together. They added to the ranch house over the years, with Sophia designing additions as their needs changed. A library for the books they both loved to read, a large workshop where she could take on small personal projects, a comfortable sitting room with wide windows overlooking the mountains. Clara married a young rancher from the next valley, and together they expanded Fletcher's operation, eventually running one of the largest cattle ranches in the region. Robert took over Sophia's carpentry business, bringing his own innovations and ideas while maintaining the standards of quality his mother had established. Both children gave Sophia and Fletcher grandchildren, a rowdy collection of boys and girls who grew up learning both carpentry and ranching, playing in the workshop and the pastures, absorbing the lessons of hard work and integrity. On their 25th wedding anniversary, Fletcher and Sophia made the climb up to their ridge one more time. It was harder than it had been when they were young, but neither of them would have missed it. They sat on the grass as the sun set, holding hands and watching the light paint the mountains in familiar glory. "You have any regrets?" Fletcher asked, as he did every year on their anniversary. "Not a single one," Sophia answered, as she always did. "You." "Only that I did not meet you sooner," Fletcher said, which was his traditional response. But then he continued, "Though perhaps we met exactly when we were supposed to. Perhaps we both needed to become who we were before we could recognize each other." "That is surprisingly philosophical," Sophia teased. "I have my moments," Fletcher said with dignity, then ruined it by grinning at her. They sat in comfortable silence as the stars emerged overhead, thinking about the journey that had brought them to this moment. The young woman who had been laughed at for her ambitions, the lonely rancher who had stood beside her when no one else would, the life they had built together through hard work, mutual respect, and love. "I was terrified that day in town," Sophia admitted, "when everyone was laughing at me. I almost got back on that wagon and left. If you had not stood up for me, I might have." "But you would have found another way," Fletcher said with certainty. "You are not the kind of person who gives up when things get hard. That is one of the things I love most about you." "I might have found another way," Sophia agreed, "but it would not have been this way. It would not have led me to you, to our children, to this life. I am glad you stopped me from running." "I am glad you let me," Fletcher said. They stayed on the ridge until the moon rose, then made their careful way back down to the ranch house, where lamplight glowed warm and welcoming in the windows. Their home, built with their own hands and filled with their own love, waiting for them as it had for 25 years. As they reached the front porch, Sophia paused to run her hand along the railing she had built so many years ago, when she was newly married and building both a business and a life. The wood was smooth and solid under her palm, weathered by time but still strong. "Good craftsmanship lasts," she said, echoing something her father used to say. "So does good love," Fletcher replied, pulling her close for a kiss that was as sweet as their first and as familiar as coming home. They went inside together, closing the door on the mountain night, secure in the knowledge that they had built something together that would last for generations. A business that served the community, a ranch that sustained a family, children who carried forward their values, grandchildren who would know their story. But most importantly, they had built a love that had weathered every challenge, celebrated every triumph, and grown stronger with each passing year. They had laughed together and cried together. They had worked side by side and supported each other's dreams. They had believed in each other when the world did not, and they had proven that belief justified. In the warmth of their home, surrounded by the evidence of their shared life, Fletcher and Sophia settled in for another evening together. They read by the fire, discussed plans for the next day, shared small domestic moments that might have seemed mundane to others but were precious to them because they were shared. When they finally climbed the stairs to their bedroom, the one Sophia had enlarged years ago to accommodate a bigger bed and a window seat where she liked to watch the sunrise, they moved with the comfortable familiarity of a quarter century together. Fletcher helped Sophia brush out her hair, now showing threads of silver. Sophia helped Fletcher with his shirt buttons, stiff from a day's work. They lay in bed together, Sophia's head on Fletcher's shoulder, his arm around her waist, fitting together like pieces of furniture joined with perfect mortise and tenon joints. "I love you," Fletcher said, as he did every night. "I love you too," Sophia replied, as she always did. And as they drifted off to sleep in the house they had built, on the ranch they had tended, in the town where Sophia had first been laughed at and then celebrated, they both felt the deep satisfaction of lives well lived and love well earned. The story that had begun with mockery and doubt had become a tale of triumph and partnership. The woman who had been told she could not succeed had built an empire with her own hands. The man who had been lonely had found his perfect partner. Together, they had created something that would endure long after they were gone, a legacy of craftsmanship and courage and love. Years continued to pass with gentle grace. Sophia and Fletcher grew old together in the way of couples who genuinely enjoy each other's company, finding new depths to their relationship even as their bodies slowed and their hair turned white. They took walks instead of climbs, sat on the porch instead of working in the barn, but they still talked for hours, still laughed at each other's jokes, still held hands like newlyweds. Robert's business continued to flourish, and he eventually expanded into Denver, though he always maintained that his mother had been the real genius, and he was just following her example. Clara and her husband built their ranch into one of the most successful in the state, known for innovation and fair treatment of workers. The grandchildren grew and thrived, some becoming builders, some becoming ranchers, all of them carrying forward the values of hard work and integrity. On a bright summer morning in 1910, Sophia and Fletcher celebrated their 35th wedding anniversary with a gathering at the ranch. All of their children and grandchildren came, filling the house and yard with noise and laughter. There was food and music and stories, many of them about the early days when Sophia had first come to Black Hawk, and the town had not known what to make of her. "Tell us again about the barn doors, Grandma," one of the youngest grandchildren begged, and Sophia obliged, though she had told the story 100 times before. She told them about learning on the job, about Fletcher's patience in helping her, about the satisfaction of seeing the finished work hanging perfectly balanced. "The important thing," she told them, "is not that I built those doors. The important thing is that I tried, even when people said I could not. And the even more important thing is that your grandfather believed in me when I most needed someone to believe." "I just recognized quality when I saw it," Fletcher interjected, putting his arm around her shoulders. "You recognized potential," Sophia corrected. "That is even rarer." As the sun set over the mountains that had witnessed their entire life together, as their family gathered around them in the warmth of love and shared history, Sophia and Fletcher looked at each other with the profound contentment of two people who had built exactly the life they wanted. They had started with nothing but courage and skill and faith in each other. They had faced down mockery and prejudice and hardship. And in the end, they had succeeded beyond anything they could have imagined that first day in Black Hawk, not just in business or social standing, but in the deeper measures that truly mattered. They had built a life of meaning and purpose. They had raised children who knew their own worth. They had contributed something lasting to their community. They had loved each other through every season, every challenge, every triumph. And on that anniversary evening, surrounded by the family that was their greatest creation, Sophia and Fletcher knew that every difficult moment had been worth it. Every doubt overcome, every obstacle surmounted, every dawn met with determination had led them to this perfect moment of peace and fulfillment. The young woman who had been laughed at had become a legend in her own lifetime, not through seeking fame or recognition, but simply through doing her work with excellence and integrity. The rancher who had stood beside her, when no one else would have been rewarded with a love that had enriched every day of his life. Together, they had proven that faith in each other, combined with hard work and determination, could overcome any obstacle and build something beautiful that would last for generations. As the stars emerged over the mountains, as their grandchildren played in the yard where Sophia had first set up her workshop so many years ago, as the evening breeze carried the scent of pine and wildflowers, Fletcher and Sophia sat together on the porch she had built, holding hands and watching their legacy unfold around them. "No regrets?" Fletcher asked one more time. "Not a single one," Sophia answered with absolute certainty. "Every moment has been exactly what I needed. Every challenge made us stronger. Every triumph was sweeter because we shared it." "Then we did something right," Fletcher said, raising her hand to his lips for a gentle kiss. "We did everything right," Sophia corrected, leaning her head on his shoulder, "because we did it together." And as the night settled over the Ward Ranch, over the town of Black Hawk that had once mocked her and now honored her, over the mountains that had witnessed every moment of their journey, Sophia Kennedy Ward and Fletcher Ward sat in perfect contentment, living proof that love, faith, and determination could build something that would last forever. They had laughed at her for trying. He had stood beside her and helped her succeed. Together, they had built not just structures of wood and stone, but a life of love and meaning that would echo through the generations to come. And that, they both agreed as they sat together under the stars they had watched for 35 years, was the greatest accomplishment of all.